So today I was continuing on with creating the letters for all of the high school bomber jackets for Huey, Eddie, Wayne, and Leia. So I was looking at pictures of the varsity font and tracing over it in three parts as it got smaller each time. So I had three separate pieces of each letter which I would cut out to make sure that I had the right shape, and it was also much quicker than drawing it out myself and trying to match it. And I would cut these out then of some scuba fabric, and I used scuba because it doesn't fray as easily and it's really difficult to hem things that are as small as these letters will be, and it takes more time than should really be necessary for such a small element. So I'd cut them out. It was quite tricky to cut all of the pieces out so they matched well because um, it is if you pinned it on, it was quite easy to shift and warp because of the lumps in the pins maybe, and when you're cutting you've got so many different angles because it's so intricate that sometimes it would come out not quite how the piece was, and also because the pieces were all cut out by me there was like that added layer of I found that especially with the corners quite a few of them came out at more of an angle rather than at a direct right angle, which was more what I wanted and neater. I used bond web to cut out the same shape to stick them onto each other, which also made it stiffer and then easier to sew together later. It was I had the same problem with the bond web as I did with the rest of the material, of it moving around, and it's difficult to get it to match exactly. Once I'd cut all the pieces out, I would take it over to the ironing board and iron on the bond web and then use that to stick them together. And I could definitely see some improvements from my first to my last, but I still think I could have got more exact with it, and it could have been a lot neater if I'd maybe tried using smaller scissors instead of the larger ones I was using. The only problem was that when I tried using the smaller scissors, they weren't as sharp as the larger ones. So I continued with them for today. Once I'd finished sticking them all together, I moved on to sewing them with the machine. I decided to use a very small zigzag stitch because it meant that I could catch the edge of the material better, and it had the benefit of being small and less noticeable that I'd get with the straight stitch, but also it caught more of the fabric as it went along, so I felt like it was a bit of the best of both worlds in that case. And this was also quite tricky to do because it was a very small area in which to get it right. I wanted it right on the edge of each layer of the letter because I wanted it to be as invisible as possible. So I had to stop and go back a lot of times and pick where it went off because it was quite easy for the machine to veer off, especially in places where I hadn't cut it quite as straight as I probably could have. And once I had done that, I managed to sew the L onto the front of Leia's jacket on the left side, I think. And I did this in the same way that I sewed all of the layers together for each individual letter, of just going right on the edge and attaching it that way. I then looked at putting together something for the back of Eddie and Leia's jackets where they would have their names in a more swirly font. So I used Google Images to find a font that I wanted to use, and then I typed out something in that font and edited it a little bit to make it a bit wider and more friendly for what I wanted to do, and also add a swish on the bottom of it, as this was how they had it in the original West End version. They had like a piece coming out to underline it underneath the name, so I added that digitally after I typed it out to help me. I then traced that out and cut it out in paper before reversing it, tracing around that paper copy onto the material. And the reason I did that was so that what I traced it out onto, with the it wouldn't show any of the lines that I'd drawn onto it, because that is now the back and that won't be seen by anyone. And I only managed to do this for Eddie's, as it took quite a long time, as it was very fiddly also. It took it was quite a time consuming thing, especially um with the more curvy letters like the E. You really have to get inside that. I found that that was quite a big thing today, was all of the cutting out, because I had to try and be as precise as possible. It took a lot longer than I would have liked it to, and I think if I'm going to work on any more of these, which currently I don't think I will have to, but if I do, I'll need to consider how long it takes me to do and put aside enough time to do that.